Hello, this is a setup guide for the dynamic combat text asset. I have here a freshly created first-person template project. The only thing I've changed is I've made the project tile that you shoot a little bit quieter because the default sound is quite loud, and I have made the project tile a little bit smaller as well because the default project is quite big. So these are the changes that I've made. You can see that the sound is quite low and the size of the project is quite small. So that's pretty much the only thing that I've changed in this project, other than adding the dynamic combat text asset, of course, that you can see here in the content browser. I think the best way to demonstrate how the system works is to create an object from scratch and show you how to add the dynamic combat text to it so that you can get it to display text on screen. So the asset itself has a demo folder, and inside there's like a map which you can open, and you can sort of see how the system sort of works. It's kind of all set up to work if you want to just see like a demonstration, but this is going to show you how to create an object from scratch. So what I'm going to do is I'm just going to create a demo folder here, and inside here I am going to create a blueprint class, just a plain old actor. Let's just call that BP test object. You can call that whatever you want if you're following along, doesn't really matter. So if we open that, the first thing we want to do is add a static mesh. So if we add a static mesh component, again, doesn't really matter what you call that. I'm just going to leave it as the default. The static mesh we want for this demonstration is sm underscore shooting target. So it looks something like this. So this is just a plain old mesh with collision on it. So let's compile and let's just drag that into the level and see what that looks like. So drag that into there. So if we run the game, you'll see that it looks like a shooting target from a shooting range. It's got collision, so the bullets bouncing off it. So the next thing we want to do is let's just delete all these events. We don't need these. So the next thing we want to do is add the combat text. Actually, sorry, we do need the begin play. I deleted that prematurely. So what you want to do in the begin play event is to spawn a combat text actor. So if we choose this function here, spawn actor from class, so hook that up. And then the class you want is BP underscore combat text. You want to spawn one of these. And then you have to provide a transform, otherwise Unreal will complain and not compile. So that's just to show you how that what I mean by that. If you don't have a transform, it's going to complain. So hook that up. It doesn't really matter what this is. We never really use the transform. And then what we want to do is when you create the BP combat text, we want to save that as a variable. So if you drag that pin out there, promote a variable, you're going to get a variable here, and let's just call that combat text. And then the final thing you have to do is if you drag out here, you call the initialize function on the combat text. We don't want that. It created a duplicate. And then we want the parent that we pass into the initialize function to be this actor. So let's just put in self and hook that up to there. So just a quick explanation. So what I'm setting up here is an actor that is going to display combat text. So in this example, I am setting up a shooting range target, and then when you shoot it, it's going to display text. In your game, you would do this begin play, these functions here. You would put that on things like enemies. Maybe you have destructible objects like crates or destructible walls or things like that. So anything that you want to display combat text, this is the process that you do. Give that a compile, and that's pretty much it. The setup process is really easy. It's just as long as you do these things, this object, whatever it is, like again an enemy or a crate, now has the capability to display combat text. The next thing you need obviously is a way to detect hit so that you get get an event to actually display the text. So what I'm going to do is I'm just going to do something really simple. So obviously in your game, your enemy should already have ways to detect hits, whether it's from projectiles or like raycasts, or maybe if it's like a third-person action game, like when a sword collision hits the enemy collision. That's when you're going to detect the hit and display some damage numbers. So for what we're going to do is we're just going to get the static mesh, and we're going to add the event for component hit. So this is going to get called anytime this object gets hit by something. So the first thing we're going to do is let's just make sure that the actor that hits this is the projectile. So let's cast that to the first person projectile, which is the actor that comes out of the gun when you shoot in this project. And if it is, let's destroy it. So it kind of looks like the target absorbs it and takes the damage. So excuse me. So if we put destroy actor, and then if we just compile and run that just to see that this event is actually being activated. So when I shoot this target, you'll see that the projectile disappears because it's being destroyed on hit. Okay, so now we have our hit event set up. So I'm just going to put a comment here and just say that this is hit detection. And again, this should be unique for your own game. Okay, this is just our simple example to to detect something being hit so we can display combat text. Okay, so if something is hit and we want to display text, we just drag in the combat text variable out, and you drag out a pin and you type in activate text. Now there's two functions. There's one just plain old activate text, and there's one with overrides. We're just going to go with this one first, activate text. And if you hook that up, you give it a value. So the value is the number that it's going to display. We obviously don't have a combat system in your game. You should calculate this value through your combat system. But since we don't have one, in this example, we're just going to simulate a number. So we're just going to get a random float in range, hook that up, and let's say this gun does anywhere from 10 to 200 damage, something like that. And let's give that a go. Let's see what happens. Okay, cool. So you see that we've got it sort of working already. So all I've done is I've created a brand new blueprint, added a static mesh which has collision on it. I've set up this logic here to create a combat text, stored it as a variable, and then when I detect hit, I just call activate text on the combat text, and that's pretty much all you need to do to get combat text working. Okay, now when I shoot the target, you'll notice that the text kind of comes from the bottom. That's because by default it's going to spawn the text at the root position of the actor. Now what you can do is that when you initialize the combat text, you can set an offset. So let's say we set the offset to 100 in the Z position. Let's set it to 150 and compile that. You'll see that the text is going to spawn 150 units in the Z position from the root position. So you can set that to whatever you want. Generally, you might want to set it to slightly above the head of the enemy that's being hit, or slightly above, the crate that's going to display the combat text. Now, something else that you can do that is quite cool is when you call activate text, you can tick this custom location, and then you can pass in a custom world location, and the text will spawn there instead. Okay, so it's essentially going to override the default position, which is the root position plus the offset. Right, that's the default position, but you can override it with setting this to true. So a really easy way and a really cool way for us to test this is when the component gets hit, we can break the hit and we can actually get the impact point. So the impact point is going to be where the bullet hits this this static mesh. Okay, so if we supply the impact point into the world location, and we've got custom location set to true, then it's going to display the combat text at the location where the projectile hits the static mesh. So if I aim for the head, you'll see that the text spawns there. If I aim down here, you'll see that the text spawns there. If I aim at the upper right shoulder, the text spawns there. There's a little bit of an offset. I'm going to go over why that is the case in the customization video. But by and large, it will spawn sort of around that area where that bullet gets hit. Sorry, where the target gets hit. So, you know, it really depends on what type of game you're making. And you know, you can choose to spawn it from a default position. So, for example, if you're doing like a a Diablo style action game, you might want to always spawn the text above the enemy's head if it's like sort of a third person camera. Whereas if you're doing like an FPS, it might be cool to spawn the text, you know, wherever the bullet hits, whether you hit the enemy in the arm or the leg or the chest. So this position obviously can be anything. You can supply like a bone position. You can supply like, you know, like a absolute world position. It can be whatever you want. So the next thing I'm going to do is just to try to quickly set up like a combat simulation just to show you how text could look with like different types of text. So if you look at this function here, there is a drop down here with text, what I call text types. So we've seen the normal one. If you choose the critical, it's going to look different. So the animation is going to be different. The colors and the way it sort of pops out is going to be different. Now, this is all customizable. You can add your own text types and you can change how these look. You can change the colors and the outlines and the size and the animations and all that. And again, you can create your own text types and customize how they look. I'm going to go over that. I'm going to go over that in another video because there are a lot of customization options, but these are just the ones that the default package comes with. So if I simulate a like a damage, like a combat system. So for example, let's say in this particular game, there's a 25% chance to cause a critical hit. So to simulate that, let's add a random float. This is going to return a value between 0 and 1. So let's say if the random value is greater than 0.75, so that's a 25% chance, then we are going to score a critical hit. And then I'm just going to copy this. And if it's below 0.75, then it's just going to be a normal hit. And we have to supply the impact point here as well. Actually, what I'm going to do, I'm just going to save this as a variable so we get rid of all these ugly lines. It's always nice to try to keep your blueprints as neat and tidy as possible. So I've stored the impact point there, and then I'm going to use the variable just to get rid of those lines. Okay, that looks a little bit neater. So let's say if we cause a critical hit, it does a lot more damage. Let's say it does 500 to say 2000, something like that. Okay. So just to go over the logic one more time, when this target is hit, it does a check to see whether a random number that we generate is greater than 0.75. So this returns a value between 0 and 1. If it is, then we do a critical hit, and if it's not greater than 0.75, then we do a normal hit. So let's see what that looks like. So this is simulating a critical hit system. So we're just going to do one more thing, just to let's add another text type. Let's say if it does a normal hit, there's also a chance to do a little bit of additional elemental damage. And let's just say there's a 50% chance. So let's copy that random float logic. And let's say if it's greater than 0.5, we're going to do some elemental damage. Again, I'm going to copy this. Actually, no, I'm not going to copy it because I'm going to use the other function. So if I just copy the combat text, if I drag out, now instead of activate text, I'm going to call activate text with overrides. So this allows you to use a text type, but it has some additional options that you can override. Now, this means that you can set up text types, and then instead of, so for example, let's say you've got like a bunch of different status effects, like slow, stun, silence, like whatever. And instead of having to create like a different entry, let's say you've got like 10 status effects. Instead of adding 10 status effects, you can just add a text type called status effect, and then you can customize. So in the um, in the general options, you can set up the animation type. You can set up like how it kind of animates. You can set up like the pop size. You can set up like how long it stays on screen for. So it's kind of the same for every status effect. But then you can call this activate text with overrides, and you can override specific things, right? So what we're going to do is we're going to use this function to display a elemental damage. So again, if it's greater than 50%, sorry, if it's greater than 0.5 in our random calculator, then we want to so it's going to do some damage. So random float in range, and let's say it just does a little bit of damage. Let's say it does like between 5 and 20, something small. The world location is going to be the impact point again. Yes, custom location, we want that to be true. So do we want to override the text? Yes, we do. And we want to call this, let's say, what elemental damage do we want? Let's do like fire damage. So let's type burn. We want to override the color of the text. So let's make that kind of something like that, orange. We do want to override the icon. So we want to use the fire icon. Outline color, shadow color, we'll leave those as black. That's fine. So if we run this now, we should see some fire damage. There you go. So 25% chance is going to be critical, otherwise it's going to be normal. And then when it does normal damage, there's another 50% chance to do a little bit of extra burn damage. Now, if you just concentrate on the burn damage, you'll see that it kind of only goes to the left and right. That's because the customization options for elemental damage is set up to only go left and right. Okay, so that's what I mean before, where you can set up like text types to animate a certain way, and then you can use this function, activate text with overrides, to actually alter what you're actually going to display on screen. So let's say we want to show like poison damage. So I can change the text to poison. I can change the color text to say something like green. Let's change the icon to poison. So there are a few icons that are provided with the package. So that's pretty much it. So I've changed the text, I've changed the color, and I've changed the icon. So now you can use the same animation going left and right, but you can override a few properties to display something different. So that just saves you from creating like fire damage, poison damage, frost damage, whatever, and then you have to kind of duplicate all the options for animations for each one. So this just allows you to make one, and then you can use it like a number of times, just changing a few override properties. So that's pretty much all I wanted to go through in the setup guide. So just to recap, so when you create a new object, you just have to add this logic to create the combat text and save a variable here. That's all you have to do for setup purposes. And then when you when you want to display combat text, you just have to call activate text. So this is if you don't need to change any override, any sort of override parameters, you just call activate text, or you can call the activate text with overrides function, and then you can override like a bunch of things. So for example, we can change the shadow color as well. Let's change that to pink. And then the poison damage is going to be, let's tick that because we do it. So each one of these overrides has a tick box, and you have to set that to true if you want to override it. So if we set that to true, then you're going to get like a purple outline. Sorry, a purple drop shadow. So that's pretty much it. The setup is quite sort of easy. In the next video, which I'm going to link below, I'm going to talk about customization options. There are a lot of things you can customize. You can get text to look, very different. You can change the animation style. So if you're interested in that, please click on that link below. Otherwise, thanks for watching. Bye.